Welcome back, Honors. Josie, don't eat that. Ugh. All right. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. Right now, we are going to go ahead and need to go ahead. I just said go ahead twice. Buckle up. This one's going to be a little longer than normal, and I am sorry. I'm not sorry. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into it a little bit. Right now, getting after it though. We left off in class talking about like the phases of the Middle Ages, right? We talked about how the early Middle Ages are like the reestablishment of Europe, right? We talked about how the high Middle Ages are like the greatest cultural achievements of the Middle Ages, and then the low Middle Ages is just like dreck and drab and tragedy, right? So, ironically enough, though, the beginning of the Middle Ages is marked by the invasions of the Roman barbarians, right? Now, not the Roman barbarians as in the Romans are barbarians, but invasions by barbarians into the outskirts of the Roman Empire. Now, there's a huge rift in the historical community right now that some historians believe, why am I slouching? Some historians believe that they actually weren't invasions at all, that they were actually migratory patterns, right? That some barbarians began to actually just migrate around looking for new land to colonize or become, like, agriculturally speaking, easier to access. A lot of different options, right? Now, we do know that there are some barbarian tribes that were actually heavy invaders, right? The Magyars being one of them, the Turks, the Huns, like those guys actually were conquesting, not trying to just find a new spot to hang out, right? So the end of the Roman emperors is marked by the invasions of those barbarians, though, like the Ostrogoths is another really big one, right? So, and you get it? Get it? The fall of the Roman Empire? Like it fell? Huh? Yeah. I know Hope's a big fan of that joke. Now, anyway, barbarian. Let's talk about what they are, right? Barbarian in common nomenclature. I know that a couple of y'all are like, we talked about how barbarian means is a root word from the word in Greek meaning to babble, right? Yes, but we're talking now about like the common nomenclature of barbarian. The stigma given to the word barbarian, right? So the word barbarian has a stigma behind it where it's a person who is believed to be uncivilized, right? Well, really, really quickly, they weren't that uncivilized, right? In the terms of the Romans were just that advanced, right? When you actually really look at the timeline of history, the Romans were phenomenally advanced as a people. They had plumbing, water systems, which I still believe to be extremely advanced, multi-leveled structures, coliseums, pantheons, Circus Maximus, Palatine Hills, the Forum, the amazing infrastructure that they had, provincial divisions of government, bureaucratic systems, governors, dictators, multi-level, so they had all of these things. So by any stretch of the imagination, anyone outside of their civilization is going to be considered very lame, right? So now, a fun fact, too, about barbarians, another reason why the Romans believed them to be so uncivilized is because barbarians didn't water down their wine. So Romans like to actually dilute their wine a little bit so they could drink it all day long and not have to just be, like, completely inebriated, whereas barbarians didn't do that. When they drank, you know? And, like, so they were like, oh, heathens. So the people, though, that called them uncivilized were the Romans, and the Romans, everyone's uncivilized, right? They conquered in the pursuit, though, of land and resources. Now, just get this image out of your noggin. All right? I know people like Harrison and Rocco and Schwantes and all you guys are going to be like, when I think barbarian, I think like William Wallace, big husky bro. Right? He's just yoked and he like breaks. He's like Bane from Batman. He's just like breaking people's backs and stuff like that, even though I'm still a big Batman fan regardless. They didn't actually look like that. They actually looked more like Coach Moff. All right? So Robert Moffat's a good example of a barbarian. Just kind of, you know, just a guy, you know, like now they were not as metallurgically sound as the Romans. They got metal when they could and forged it the best that they could. But the thing about a barbarian is they're just kind of, cloth is a big piece of their like military-esque uniform. The use of spears, daggers, sharp-edged weapons, wooden shields is another big thing as well. They just kind of, they don't look what you want them to look like, right? Now, really quickly also, don't judge the barbarians because of that garb, and don't judge Coach Moff because of those things. Rufio, if you get any hair on that couch, I'm going to be really upset. Don't judge the barbarians, right? Barbarians had kings and governments, kinda. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they had, like, tribal chiefs early on, and something like that. And then they created money, eventually, right? Like, it was based off Roman money, but they also said, but here's the thing, though. raise your hand right now if you have some type of European heritage in your system somewhere that is not directly Roman Italian. So you technically are a descendant of a barbarian, right? Many of you are descendant of barbarians, like the Anglos, the Saxons, the Anglo-Saxons, the Jutes, the Scandinavians, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, the Huns, the Magyars, the Poles. The Poles is a big one as well. Now, they settled all of Europe, though. Give them some credit. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, we'll write that. All right, so anyway, now, the big sectors of barbarianism. You have your Asiatic barbarians, right, coming from your Russia and Eastern Europe area, which are the Huns and the Magyars, right? The Magyars actually settled the Arpad dynasty as a big one. They actually settled places like Hungary, Moldova, Estonia, like areas like that. And then the Huns were kind of the very first Russians, right? So offshoots from the early Mongolians, things like that. Culturally very different, though. Attila's their big leader, right? Almost single-handedly destroyed the Byzantine Empire. And then from Western Europe, you have your Germanics, right? The Germanic Northerners, the Saxons, the Angles, the Goths are the big three, right? Now, speaking of that, continuing forward, the Germanics are the ones that we're a little bit more focused on. We're more focused on the Germanics due to the fact that the Western European sector throughout history has provided a lot of stuff to history and many, many game-changing, influential, like, ripples throughout everything, right? So the big ones that you got the Ostrogoths, which actually took over the Italian peninsula. Really, really, really good group of people right there. There's actually a very cool picture of one of the first Ostrogoth king of Rome after he sacked Rome and took it over and actually sat in the throne of the former emperors, right? The Visigoths, which are modern-day Spaniards, right? The Angles and the Saxons, which make up modern-day Britain. And then, of course, the Franks, which is all of Central Europe, right? So the irony that so many Franks would probably be offended that we refer to them as Germanic peoples, but we're going to let them get over it. Now, so the Germanics also, though, were a very warlike, very, very intense society, and they were completely, organized and actually would even go hereditary leaders, right? So the big thing about the barbarians is their drive to consolidate, right? So they wanted to actually consolidate land holdings, pick up the pieces of the leftover Roman infrastructure, and try to reestablish something. Now, would it ever be quite like what the Romans had? No. But if you ever think about it, why could the Romans so efficiently actually take over all of Europe? Due to the fact, well, that most of the barbarian tribes out there were not very organized, right? So the barbarians are going to seek to organize themselves, okay? So barbarian tribes are going to put hereditary leaders into power. They are going to begin to make permanent settlements in Europe, and they're going to stop being so Paleolithic and wandering around trying to find food sources, even though they single-handedly destroyed everything of intelligence that actually led up to this entire point. We're going to try and let them go, or we're going to try and let it go, right? So, and then Clash of Clans, get it? So, really fast, though, one of the first guys to ever actually do this, and he's like the French superhero. The French love this dude. His name is Clovis, right? So, Clovis, being around from about 466 to 511, he was actually there when Rome fell. We believe he may have been a Roman military leader, right? He actually even called his law Roman law. So, he established the Frankish kingdom in Central Europe, right? So after Rome falls, he tries to grab on to what is actually left out there, right? So there's a lot of wealthy people out there. Former patricians live out there with their really, really big villas. Keep that in mind in the back of your head, right? Conquered many competing tribes and regional Roman political leaders and establishes the very first kingdom outside of the Roman Empire, okay? So something really, really important about him as well is he ushers in a dynasty of family members underneath himself. So really, really quickly jot this down, his last name. It's Merovingian. All right, Merovingian. Let me, I'll Google it really quick to make sure that we're not misspelling it. Merovingian. There we go. So it's Merovingian, right there. Merovingians, right? A Salian Frankish dynasty. So now the Merovingians underneath Clovis are going to begin to get organized, and something else that's huge about him is since he is the first kingdom outside of the former Roman Empire, he decides to convert to Christianity, right? Ironically enough, that's being nagged by his wife. Now, so really, really quick, he's going to spread Christianity even further, which we know after writing our DBQ is considered a chink in the armor of Roman military establishment, right? That the moral code that actually backs a lot of Christianity kind of really, really sent some ripple effects through their entire military and actually probably made them weaker as an empire. But It is what it is, right? So he is considered the founder of France, like the father of France. Conquered a huge area, though, but he actually didn't really bring back any of that Roman intelligence, which is a really big pain in the butt. Now, he even called his own law that he created Roman law, which is just like him ripping off something that the Romans used in the first place without actually even bringing back really good infrastructure ideas like roads, canals, plumbing, like the plumbing. The plumbing's huge, right? Rocco? Yeah. Like, so Robert, yeah. Gardner, you agree? Now, Clovis, though, was nagged to, like, actually, this is a fun story. He was actually, while you're jotting, that you don't need that. While you're jotting this stuff down, check this out. This man's out boss. All right, but we're not going to get it. His name is not Boss. His name is Charlemagne. But anyway, before we get there, the biggest thing about Clovis, he actually, his wife told him, it was like, hey, look, if we convert to Christianity, we actually might actually have more power over the people that we're actually trying to rule over right now, because a lot of them are actually converting to Christianity. Even like, before Rome fell, a lot of people were converting to Christianity, because, 400 years ago, that guy, Jesus, he did some amazing stuff, right? And he was like, no, I don't want to convert to Christianity. I have my pagan gods. I'm sorry, I'm like just messing with a plant over here. I like my pagan gods. They do good stuff. We sacrifice people to them. That's the Aztecs, but it's fun to say. So we, I like them. I don't want to do that. I don't want to switch. And so she says, fine. If you want to be that way, I'm gonna baptize your son, who's gonna take over the throne for you one day. Anyway, all right. So she actually baptized. Oh, Rufio's having a dream. All right. So anyway, now I'm gonna baptize your son, right? And you're basically going to have to just deal with it. And so what she does is she in secret baptizes him, but then there was an infection in the water, and he actually got sick and he died. So that's why am I laughing about that? But so what ended up happening with that is then she's like, oh wait, whoa, and he actually refused to do it. Was convert after that. And she was like, wait. There's no way it'll happen twice. And then she baptizes his other son, and then his other son almost dies, gets almost a very similar infection. And then he's like, this is ridiculous, but finally relents and actually ends up being baptized, right? So that's a huge drop in the bucket for the spread of the Christian faith, right? Now, then you got this guy, Charlemagne, which is another family dynastic leader, right? He's the Carolingian emperor, right? It's a Carolingian, C-A-R-O-L-I-G. Here it is. Carolingians. There you go. The Carolingian dynasty, right? Actually, originally starting with his father, Pepin III, also known as Pepin the Short, which is actually just really funny. So there we go. The Carolingian dynasty underneath Charlemagne was another very, very powerful, very strong-willed like leadership. So thing about it is he creates wow, it's right there in front of me. Carolingian Empire out of what was left of the Roman Empire. He actually extends the borders of Clovis's holdings, and he actually even managed to spread some intelligence. Really, really quick, right? The Carolingian Renaissance. The Carolingian Renaissance was actually ushered in by him and his family that followed after him that actually saw a resurgence in art, record keeping, the attempts to try and consolidate intelligence. So thanks, Charlemagne, good stuff. Without you, we probably wouldn't have half the crap that we have now. Also, though, he's going to be crowned the very first Holy Roman Emperor. So the fragmented Roman Empire actually extended up into common-day, modern-day Germany, right? And so actually that area would be known as the Holy Roman Empire, the de facto kingdom of the Catholic Church, right? So Pope Leo III, though, crowns him the first Holy Roman Emperor, a.k.a. Charles the Great, right? Charlemagne. Now, he is known as the father of Europe. He united barbarian tribes in Western Europe and brought about some stability, even though he also mass murdered a lot of people that refused to convert to Christianity. We're not going to get into that, though. All right, so one of the cool things about him, though, is a lot of people are actually related to him. A lot of people are actually related, genetically speaking, on a DNA level. Sorry, I'm just fixing my socks. To Charlemagne, because he had a lot of kids, several wives, and then also he refused to let his daughters get married. That's a fun one. So he had 7 daughters, and he refused to let any of them get married. They were allowed to have kids and live with a man in the keeps and stuff, but he refused to let them get married because he didn't want their new husbands challenging him for power. All right, so now Charlemagne is a very, 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 very huge, very important person, but he extends that Frankish kingdom. But then these people shake up everything. So after Charlemagne dies, his empire actually gets divided up a little bit, and new offshoots begin to grow, a lot of resentment between each other, but he is still important of his consolidation of Europe, right? But the Vikings are going to show up eventually, and they're a warrior culture from Scandinavia, and they actually raided most of Europe. Now, here's the thing about Vikings. When they raid, they don't raid and stay. They raid and then go back home, right? So they establish settlements throughout Europe, and they even establish settlements in North America. Leif Erikson, happy Leif Erikson Day. Hinga Durgan Durgan. Now, R.I.P. Hildenberg. Now, their lands lead to their raids, though, led to the establishment of this thing called feudalism. Now, the Viking culture, though, is still a very prominent thing. But they kind of, ipso facto, quid pro quo, even though neither of those phrases apply to what I'm trying to say, but their raids and violence actually led to the establishment of this thing called feudalism. Because when they raid places, they don't want your land. They want your money, your items, and your women, right? So a lot of Europeans are going to decide we need a system to keep us safe, to keep order, and to grow wealth. All right, so, and it's called, drum roll, please, bang, the feudal system, right? So go ahead and write down feudalism, Feudalism, right? Feudalism. Feudalism has three things: protect, tax, and power, right? Or keep order, if you want. So protect, keep order, power. Wait, protect, keep order, tax. Grow wealth. You understand what I'm saying. Now, anyway, the thing about the feudal system is, yeah, that's right, it's another graphic organizer that you're going to draw on your notes because it's so really important. So what you should do really quick is pause me, like right now. There you go. Now we're coming back. All right, so this chart is drastically important because it actually set up a hierarchical system within the medieval barbarian kingdoms to try and actually make it so people would actually not die in large numbers and also be living on outskirts of towns by themselves. And it also gave a chance for these big leaders to actually consolidate their power, right? So let's go ahead and break this thing down, right? Let me actually move my face down here so you can see everything a little bit easier. So there we go. Now, anyway, at the very, very top of the first brick, you have the king, right? So the king actually supersedes everybody else, and he is up there alone by himself, independent of the system. Now, when you look this stuff up online, you will see a very rudimentary chart of this graph, and I think it's garbage because it doesn't make any sense when you actually literally look into it. They actually have the king as a part of the triangle itself, but that doesn't make a lot of sense because that's just a hierarchical system. The reason why I like this drawing a lot better is due to the fact that each of these triangles is considered a large estate, right, or a manor, okay? So inside of each of those manors, they are controlled by lords or nobles, right? Lords, of course, being your very heavily influential, rich, wealthy people. Nobles being their family line, right? The nobility, the D'Amato family, the McGee lineage, the Magrinos, the Dorenzos, right? All of you nobles out there doing your thing. Now, then you had the vassals and the knights, which actually are there to try and, they work as assistants or underneath your lords, right? So they are a step down and they provide something. We'll get into what they provide. What they provide are these arrows right here. It's their purpose, their job, okay? Then you had underneath it the serfs. The serfs are the biggest ones. You can also write down the word peasants because not every peasant was a serf, but here's the biggest thing. Serfs are not slaves, all right? Notice I have a document right there. Serfs are actually bound to the land by a contract. They're kept there. They have to stay there. It's much like a lease, hence the name landlord, right? So they actually are not allowed to leave without the permission of their lord due to the fact that they have to work a certain number of years to try and receive housing, food, protection, right? So serfs actually profit a lot from this whole system. But now let's get into these arrows, right? So this arrow right here, the serfs to their lords to be able to stay on that land, they provide labor, right? So that's what they provide. The vassals provide military service, and the reason why they have two arrows is because they protect the lords and their land in times of need, and if the king ever wants to wage war, he tells the lords to send his vassals. You understand what I'm saying? And so they also provide military service. Now, somebody right now is raising their hands like, wait, I thought the lords were also like knights and officers in the military as well. They were. So technically, if you really look at it, the lord is just a vassal of the king, but that's neither here nor there. All right, so now taxes were actually then provided by the lords and the nobles to the king, and the entire system just keeps on running, right? So very, very, very good stuff, but it's a very good organizational system. That chart is massively important. Star it, underline it. Well, you can't underline chart, but highlight the entire thing if you have to. Now, each plot of land in this system, each of those triangles is known as a fief, and it is actually believed that these fiefs in this system was just kind of a falling out of the old Roman system because these villas actually existed on the expanses of the entire empire that were owned by patricians before Rome ever fell, right? So, boom! That right there is the early Middle Ages. We crushed it. I'm very proud of you guys. Like I said, I know it was a little bit longer, but look, you're honors kids. Get over it, all right? So, but we will talk more about this stuff on Monday. I will see you guys then. Have a great weekend.